Hey everybody, it's Jeremy here with the Guillette Group in Southwest Florida, and today we're going to be doing a Q3 market update. Haven't done one of these in quite some time, so I actually took the time. I've got quite a few notes here. That's to keep me on track, because if you've ever been in a conversation with me, squirrel, that's literally how it goes down. So we've actually got 6 topics we're going to cover today. It'll cover buyers, sellers, renters, and a whole lot more. You've probably heard this before, but we know this to be true. Real estate is hyper local. So what you might see on the news or what you read in your local market is likely going to be very different from what we might share today. So having said that, let's dive in. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to cover were the market conditions. And this data, we look at this every single month. I'm comparing August of this year, 2024, versus July. That's the most recent data that we have. And no surprise, what you're going to see is prices are down, and they continue to trend down. They've been doing that for about 3.5 months at this point. The days on market is up again. No surprise, when we see pricing going down, typically we see days on market going up. In this month, they were up to 70 days, was the average for Bonita Estero. Sales were up slightly, so that was a little bit of a surprise. This was just modestly above where we were in July, so nothing significant. But the one data point that I took away that is quite different is supply. And I don't mean different in terms of trending, but different in terms of what the rest of the data is showing us. So the supply, and again, inconsistent with both what we're seeing for sales and days on market, supply is actually down. And in fact, it's been down. In fact, there's a chart here that I pulled. It's been down since March. So interestingly, why is that? And honestly, I don't think many realtors will track this, or many teams look at this. They don't know how to track it, why to track it, or honestly what it even means. And the truth is, we are losing a lot of listings to termination and expiration. So basically, sellers are giving up. It's hard to show a home, to keep your house show ready. This morning, one of our new listings had its very first showing request come in. An hour, so 63 minutes ahead of the requested showing. So you can imagine it's been on, you haven't had any activity, and then all of a sudden, boom, here's a showing request. Anyways, so keeping a house ready, so I'm talking about squirrel, keeping a house ready, keeping it clean, it's a lot of work, So if you're on the market for 6 months, of course you have fatigue. And those are the sellers that are saying, you know what, I don't need to sell, or I don't want to sell, I'm going to wait this out. And they're choosing to just let the listing expire or terminate. And I got to tell you, that might be exactly the wrong thing to do based on the supply and what's happening. But we'll talk more about that when we talk about sellers. Okay, so let's talk about mortgage rates. This was a big deal as we're filming this. Today is Thursday, and yesterday the Feds announced a 0.5% or a 50 basis point reduction. And they had been signaling, in the last Fed meeting, they had suggested that in this meeting we would likely see, I forget the exact statement that Powell said, but it was like, we recognize now's the time, we need a change of course. Well, here we are. So we went down a half a point, 50 basis points yesterday. That's really great news for anyone that's looking to buy a home that needs to finance. The interesting thing, and I thought this was interesting, and I want to get the numbers right, so let me pull the actual dates. On September 16th, the average 30-year mortgage was 6.12%. On the 17th, it actually went down ever so slightly to 6.11%. And then yesterday, with the rate decrease of 0.5%, we all know what they did, right? Wrong. They went up. Now, they went up to 6.15. Quite honestly, that's a rounding error. But they went up. What the heck? We get a 0.5% decrease in the Fed rate, and average mortgage rates go up. So how can that be? Well, the Fed had already signaled that this was likely going to happen. The question was it going to be 0.25% or 0.5%? And the interesting thing to me is, well, no one ever suggested more than 0.5%, so why did they go up? Who knows? The bigger part is, and I think this is probably more important and more compelling, the Feds went on and further stated that they are going to continue to decrease rates in 2024 by another 50 to 75 basis points. And if you look at this chart, which thankfully, we have two customers, and they're honestly partners of ours. One works in private banking, the other is with a huge national mortgage broker. Their companies have analysts, and they send us updates all the time to help keep us informed. But at the end of the day, the Feds have already signaled they're going to be bringing more rate reductions in this year. So if we look at what happened with this week's rate cuts, they were already priced in. So that's pretty interesting, because if we're signaling again that we're going to drop another 50 to 75 basis points, and there's only 2 meetings left, what do we think is going to happen? I think we're going to see rates continue to drop even ahead of the time that they get formally announced. So that's really good news for home buyers. What does that really mean? Well, frankly, it means, sorry about that, duty always calls. What does it mean? It means home affordability is going to improve. So will buyers move off the sidelines? I think probably, but we'll talk more about that again when we get to buyers. So let's talk about sellers. And this is kind of a big deal. If you haven't watched the video, hopefully the editor can put it here or somewhere on the screen. Angie just did a video that talked about if you're trying to sell in this market, some things that you want to do. She really covered 3 primary topics, those being 1, pricing your home correctly. That is the most important thing that you need to do. 2, making the home really stand out. And then 3, working with someone that knows how to market the home appropriately. You know, not your neighbor, not your part-time agent, your cousin that got licensed last year, because you want to throw them a deal. Like, in this market, you need to know how to market and create mass exposure. So again, excuse me, she covers that in that video. It's a really good topic. We remain pretty consistent. We just launched that a couple weeks ago. There's not a ton of change there, but I do want to share, when it relates to this, making the home stand out is important. And that could be cleaning, it could be fixing the things that you've just kind of lived with. It's like every time we list, and we tend to buy and sell and move quite a bit, every time we list a house, we get the house ready for sale, and we're like, oh, I forget how nice this house is. Or, I don't know why we didn't just oil that squeaky door, like 6 or 7 months ago. So all those little things that you've been putting off, it's time, just do them. At the end of the day, buyers have options, and they're buying the homes that genuinely stand out. We've seen the inversion occur, more recently now with supply and demand. So we have to be aware of that if you're going to sell in this market. Okay, so let's talk about, and before I get there, this is why I made notes. There was a statistic that I saw for both June and July that had a shockingly high number of contracts that don't get to the closing table. So the other thing that's important, whether you're on the buy side or the sell side, you want to be working with people that know the contracts, know your rights, and quite frankly, can get you to the table, especially if you're the seller. So where are those deals falling apart? Honestly, it's appraisals, because things aren't priced appropriately, and quite frankly, lenders, and honestly, any cash buyer, they're not going to overpay in today's market, especially with the amount of inventory that's available. We see things falling apart in the inspection phase. And then lastly, just to be quite honest, buyers are getting cold feet. So like, all of these things are building up, and we're seeing, some of these contracts fall through. Okay, so that was market conditions number 1, mortgage rates number 2, seller insights number 3. Let's shift to buyers. And I kind of just shifted this a little bit. I kind of mentioned this already, but buyers are looking for homes where the projects are already done. They're looking for homes that stand out. Quite frankly, I mentioned this, they have a lot of choices. So with that inversion of the supply and demand versus what we had for the last few years, buyers are getting particularly picky. And honestly, they're not negotiating a whole lot. We've had multiple listings where someone throws a number at us, we counter pretty reasonably, and they just walk away. And the reason being, they can. There's so much inventory right now available to them that they don't have to continue to try to work on a price. They're going to probably throw something at the wall and see if it sticks. I know that's not super encouraging as a seller, but if you're a buyer, it could be a good time. Sellers are negotiating repairs again. We weren't doing that for a long time. You were basically buying the house as is. And even though the contract says as is, it was still very customary. And honestly, we still encourage both buyers and sellers in 4 categories to do repairs. Anything that's safety, structural, mechanical in nature, we encourage, because on the seller side, if you don't do it and now we know about it, it has to be disclosed. On the buyer side, you don't want to be, acquiring something that has these known issues. These are real defects. This isn't a scuff mark, on a baseboard. These are the items that need and should be repaired. Okay, so let's talk about the rental market. So something that we've heard quite a few times now from our sellers is a statement along the lines of, well, if we don't sell, we'll just rent. And while that sounds good, conversationally, excuse me, it's really not credible in many cases. Some people really don't want to be landlords, or are honestly incapable of being a landlord. They're not going to know how to handle certain situations. They're not going to have the Rolodex of tradespeople, when that issue comes up, and it will come up. We own multiple rental properties here in the state and beyond. But between mortgages, taxes, insurance, pest control, if you're in a neighborhood that has, or if you have a pool service, if you're in a neighborhood that has a CDD and HOA fees, these things all add up. And when you look at your true carrying costs, you probably can rent, but you're likely going to break even, or worse, you might not even break even. And so some of the conversation has been, well, I don't want to take the loss. I'd rather rent it for a year or two and then see what the market looks like then. And the truth is, we don't anticipate this cycle to change quickly. And the typical real estate cycle is 5 years on average. So that could work, but it's likely the home that you turn over is not going to be the home that you get back in terms of condition. So as it relates to the market, it's worth saying it's very similar to our broader market as a whole. There is a lot of inventory, and not just seasonal. We used to rent predominantly seasonal. Now we have a lot of annual rentals as well. And we're seeing rates, lease rates are coming down just, because of the same reason. Inventory is up. There's a lot more options. So, I should have mentioned this too. If you're thinking about leasing or renting your home, there are routine and worse unexpected maintenance expenses. So that needs to be accounted for as well. And I mentioned this but if you don't want to be the landlord, you got to pay someone else. So property managers, they also take a good amount. So on the front end, it's typically 1 month's rent to place the renter, and then there's a fee monthly. It's either a set fee per month or a percentage. That's going to take a pretty good amount of your revenue. So, let us have a conversation. If you're really thinking about renting, let's just talk through it. It could be a great option if you bought the property right, or if you bought it in the last few years. It could be a little more challenging, but we can help you understand and inform, that decision making. Okay, so what about local, or maybe, I started the video saying things are hyper local as it relates to real estate. There are some national trends as well, obviously, mortgage rates being one. It is an election year. So let's talk about that a little bit, because we do believe that real estate is local. We can see all across the country, some markets are really depressed, some markets are booming, and there's no inventory. It's interesting, we were one of those markets that were absolutely booming during the COVID years. We had people coming here in droves. People could work from anywhere. They were getting head starts on retirement or just choosing lifestyle, quite frankly. Some of those restrictions, or not restrictions, some of the work from home capabilities, I would say, are being recalled. And we're finding many people need to be back in the office. They don't have the same amount of flexibility. What drove such a surge in our appreciation is, it's honestly going to have an effect on a correction. So we're seeing that now. How long will it take? We don't know, but the truth is there's some good things in our favor. So locally, what do we see? Well, let's start nationally. So the first thing is, it's an election year. And 9 of the past 11 election years, the year following saw an increase in both sales and home prices. So meaning sales as in the volume or number of sales, but also the value, the home price itself. So what do you think? Are we going to see the 10th out of 12th year where we see that again next year? Or are we going to see the 3rd out of 12th year where we see a further decline in home prices? I tend to be in the prior. So I think there's some other factors, that being mortgage rates, as an example, are going to help move buyers back into the market. The gap's going to close between those folks, the sellers that are sitting on mortgages under 3% or just around 3%, that are going to make the decision it's time to upsize, or it's time to downsize, or we want to be in a different part of Southwest Florida, or we want to leave Southwest Florida. Who knows? So I think that's going to be an influence. I also know we're coming into season. So if many of you are watching this from up north, whether it be Canada, the Midwest, the Northeast, I grew up there. And I lived there, quite frankly, for a long time. We've been here 12 years, and we don't miss the low gray ceiling, cold. Angie and I say all the time, we don't shovel sunshine. Again, see, squirrel, this is what happens. But anyways, when Labor Day hits, you guys up north are starting to think about like, oh man, it's the unofficial end of summer. Great football weather, by the way. But then we get into like, what are we gonna do all winter? No one looks forward, or few people look forward. Maybe you can ski or do some sort of winter sport. Generally, most people don't look forward to the winter months. It seems like we kind of hibernated when we were up north. That's a good thing for us, because like I'm now having conversations like, that heat and humidity is about to go away. And it's funny, I remember this conversation. Angie and I were at Fort Myers Brewing, which, by the way, if you haven't been, it's fantastic. Maybe I'll put a link or something in the comments. But and today is a Thursday, food truck rally day. So if you're interested, they do like live music all the time, food truck rally. Anyways, we're there one weekend. We're having a good time. The kids are there. They got games outside. I think there was live music that day. But we meet these 2 school teachers. They were super people. And I remember the wife said something, and it was pretty profound. She said, "We suffer all summer long to get to winter. And then all these snowbirds get to come down and they just get to enjoy it." And I was like, first of all, I don't really think we suffer. First of all, there's less traffic. The dining specials are unreal in the summertime. Like if you know where to find them, and actually right now, Sizzle is a big thing between restaurants. They offer a special menu. It typically anyways, there's all kinds of dining specials in the summertime. And frankly, there's less crowds. So do I love the heat and the humidity? No, of course not. But I can do whatever I want. I go out early in the morning if I want to go play golf or whatever activity. We boat a lot, and that kind of weather doesn't really impact us with the coastal breeze. So you can always do something even in this weather. But that is interesting, her comment about suffering all summer to get to winter. But back to the market, we're coming into that season where the snowbirds are returning. So I think between the snowbirds, the mortgage rates, just the normal seasonality that we see, we're going to see a bit of a rebound as we come into the end of the year and certainly exiting into the start of next year. So I guess that's probably, all right. Truth is, oh my gosh, that's 18 minutes. It's longer than I expected. Hopefully this is helpful. If it is, please do us a favor, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share this with anyone that you think might be interested in looking to either sell or purchase in Southwest Florida. Frankly, even beyond that, we are exceptionally well networked between our brokerage. We are with the 6th largest brokerage in the US, and locally we have 1,500 agents in Southwest Florida. That's part of our marketing plan, quite frankly. But if you know someone looking to buy or sell here or anywhere else in the country, we can help you screen. Of course, we'd love to help you if you're here. Again, I'm Jeremy with the Guillette Group. We'll see you the next time.